17-year-old Emma Thompson had always been the girl with paint under her fingernails in the small town of Millbrook. Everyone knew her as the young artist who could turn a blank canvas into something magical. Her small bedroom was filled with colorful paintings of flowers, landscapes, dreams she hoped to chase after finishing school. Emma loved to paint early in the morning when the sunlight came through her bedroom window. She would sit cross-legged on her old wooden floor, surrounded by tubes of paint and brushes of every size. Her mother, Margaret, would often find her there, lost in her own world of colors and imagination. The walls of Emma's room told the story of her artistic journey. There were paintings from when she was 12 and could barely draw a straight line. Next to them hung her recent masterpieces that made visitors stop and stare in wonder. Emma painted everything she saw and felt. Happy yellow sunflowers that seemed to dance on the canvas. Peaceful blue lakes that looked so real you could almost hear the water gently moving. Green meadows where children played under cotton candy clouds dotted school. Emma was known as the quiet girl who always carried a sketchbook. During lunch breaks, while other students chatted about television shows and gossip, Emma would sit under the old oak tree in the schoolyard, drawing the world round her, her art teacher. Mrs. Davies often said that Emma had a special gift that could take her far beyond the borders of their small town. Margaret Thompson worked hard to support her daughter's dreams. Every morning at 5, she would leave their little house on Oak Street to clean the floors and rooms at Millbrook Hospital. After finishing there, she would rush to the morning Glory Cafe, where she served coffee and sandwiches to the lunch crowd. Money was always tight, but Margaret never complained. She knew that Emma's talent was something special, and she was determined to help her daughter reach for the stars. Their home was small but filled with love. The living room walls were covered with Emma's artwork, creating a gallery that brought joy to anyone who visited. Margaret would often sit in her favorite chair after her long work days, looking at Emma's paintings and dreaming about the day when the whole world would know her daughter's name. But everything changed on a cold Tuesday morning in March. Emma had been feeling tired for weeks. At first, Margaret thought it was just the stress of school and staying up late painting. But when Emma started getting bruises that wouldn't heal and complained of feeling weak, Margaret knew something was wrong. Sitting in the sterile white room of Dr. Harrison's office, Emma held her mother's hand tightly. The doctor's face was serious as he looked at the test results. The words he spoke seemed to come from another world. Words that would change their lives forever. "I'm sorry, but the tests show you have leukemia." The room became silent except for the sound of the clock ticking on the wall. Emma felt like she was watching a movie about someone else's life. This couldn't be happening to her. She was 17. She had dreams to chase and paintings to create. She had planned to apply to art school next year and show the world what she could do with a paintbrush and her imagination. Margaret's face went pale as she tried to process what the doctor was saying. Treatment would be expensive, very expensive. The family's small savings would disappear quickly, and there would be many months of therapy ahead. That evening, Emma lay in her bed surrounded by her paintings, but for the first time in years, she didn't feel like creating anything. The colors on her walls seemed to mock her now. How could she paint flowers and sunshine when her world had just turned dark? Margaret sat in the kitchen, thinking Emma was asleep, but Emma could hear the quiet sobs coming from downstairs. Her strong mother, who had never let Emma see her cry, was breaking down under the weight of fear and worry about money. Emma made a decision that would change everything. She couldn't let her mother carry this burden alone. She had something valuable. She had her art. The next morning, Emma gathered her best paintings from around her room. Each piece represented hours of careful work and happy memories. The painting of the lighthouse that reminded her of the family trip to the coast last summer, the portrait of her grandmother that had taken weeks to perfect. The series of flower paintings that Mrs. Davies had said were good enough for a real gallery. "I'm going to sell these at the weekend market," Emma announced as Margaret prepared breakfast. Margaret dropped her coffee mug, and it shattered on the kitchen floor. "Emma, no. Your art is your future." Emma looked at her mother with determination in her young eyes. "This is my future. Mom, I'm fighting for it." As Margaret knelt to clean up the broken pieces of the mug, Emma knelt beside her and helped. Together, they picked up each piece. Just like they would face this challenge together, one step at a time. Every Saturday morning at 7 o'clock, Emma would carefully load her paintings into her mother's old blue car. Margaret would drive slowly through the quiet streets of Millbrook, both of them silent as they headed toward the weekend market. Emma's small folding table and chair were packed in the back, along with a cardboard box that held her most precious creations. The Millbrook weekend market was a cheerful place where local farmers sold fresh vegetables. Bakers offered warm bread, and crafters displayed handmade quilts and jewelry. Emma's spot was between Mrs. Patterson's flower stand and young Tom's homemade jam booth. The location was perfect because people walking by could smell the sweet roses and see Emma's bright paintings. At the same time, setting up her table became a ritual that Emma found comforting. She would spread a clean white cloth over the folding table, then carefully arrange her paintings so each one could be seen clearly. The sunflower paintings went on the left side because they caught the morning light beautifully. The landscape paintings stood in the middle, and her smaller pieces were displayed on a wooden easel that Margaret had found at a yard sale. Emma's first day at the market had been terrifying. She sat behind her table feeling small and scared, wondering if anyone would even stop to look at her work. But slowly, people began to notice. Mrs. Henderson from the bakery was her first customer, buying a small painting of daisies for her kitchen window dot between her chemotherapy sessions at the hospital. Emma painted with fierce determination that surprised everyone who knew her. The treatment schedule was exhausting. Every Tuesday and Friday, she would sit in the hospital's treatment room for hours, watching the medicine drip slowly into her arm through a thin tube. The nurses were kind and would bring her art supplies so she could sketch while the treatment worked its way through her body. Some days, Emma was so weak she could barely hold a brush. Her hands would shake, and the simple act of mixing colors would leave her breathless. Other days, the medicine made her feel sick to her stomach, and the smell of paint would make her feel worse. But she never missed a market day, even when Margaret begged her to rest. Emma would insist on going. "The market is where hope lives," Emma would tell her mother. "I need to be there." Her paintings were bold and bright, filled with the kind of joy that seemed impossible for someone fighting such a serious illness. She painted sunflowers reaching toward the sky with faces like happy children. She created pictures of children playing in green meadows under blue skies dotted with white clouds. Her lighthouse painting showed strong towers standing firm against stormy seas, their lights cutting through dark nights to guide ships safely home. People would stop at Emma's table, drawn by the vibrant colors and positive energy of her work. They would study each painting carefully, often asking questions about her techniques and inspiration. When they learned about her situation, many would buy small pieces to help. Some customers would return week after week, not just to buy art, but to check on Emma and offer words of encouragement. Mrs. Davies, Emma's art teacher from school, had quietly spread word around town about Emma's courage and talent. She would visit other shops and businesses, showing photos of Emma's work on her phone and telling everyone about the brave young artist who was fighting cancer while creating beautiful art. Soon, regular customers began appearing at Emma's stand. Old Mr. Wilson, who had lost his wife the previous year, bought a painting of red roses because they had been his late wife's favorite flowers. He hung the painting in his kitchen where he could see it every morning while drinking his coffee, and it helped him remember the happy times instead of feeling only sadness. Young couples who were buying their first homes would visit Emma's stand, looking for paintings to make their new houses feel like home. They would carefully choose landscapes that reminded them of places where they had fallen in love or dreamed of traveling together someday. Each sale brought Emma closer to covering another day of treatment. She kept a small notebook where she wrote down every purchase and calculated how much money she had earned. On good days, she could afford several days of medicine. On slower days, she would earn just enough for the bus fare to the hospital, but the medical bills kept growing like weeds in a garden. The cost of treatment was much higher than Emma and Margaret had imagined. Some weeks, despite Emma's beautiful paintings and the kindness of customers, she sold nothing at all on those days. She would sit quietly by her paintings, fighting back tears and wondering if a dream of beating cancer was too big to achieve. During the difficult weeks, Emma would watch other vendors at the market selling their goods successfully while her table remained empty. She would see families walking by, laughing and enjoying their Saturday morning, and feel envious of their carefree lives. Sometimes the weight of her situation would feel too heavy to carry. But Emma had learned something important about hope. Hope wasn't about feeling happy all the time. Hope was about showing up even when things looked impossible. Still, every week, she returned to her spot at the market with new hope painted on fresh canvases, ready to face whatever the day would bring. On a particularly grey Saturday in October, Emma woke up feeling like she was carrying the weight of the world on her thin shoulders. The chemotherapy session on Thursday had been one of the worst yet. The medicine had made her so sick that she had spent most of Friday in bed, unable to keep food down and feeling dizzy whenever she tried to stand up. Margaret had begged Emma to stay home and rest, but Emma insisted on going to the market. She moved slowly round her bedroom, carefully selecting which paintings to bring. Her hands shook as she wrapped each piece in old newspapers to protect them during the short car ride to the market square. The weather matched Emma's mood perfectly. Dark clouds hung low in the sky, threatening rain at any moment. A cold wind blew through the market, making the colorful banners and signs flutter like nervous birds. Many of the regular vendors had decided to stay home, leaving large empty spaces where their cheerful stands usually brightened the square. Emma barely had the strength to arrange her paintings on the small table. Each movement felt like climbing a mountain. She wrapped herself in her mother's old brown coat, the one that smelled like lavender and coffee and all the comfort of home. The coat was too big for Emma's shrinking frame, but it provided warmth and a sense of security on this difficult day. Margaret helped set up the display, constantly asking if Emma was feeling all right and suggesting they pack up and go home. But Emma was stubborn in the way that only brave people can be. She sat behind her small table, watching people hurry past without stopping, their heads down against the cold wind. The morning hours passed slowly. A few people paused to glance at Emma's paintings, but most were rushing to finish their shopping before the rain started. Emma tried to smile and greet each person who walked by, but her voice was weak and many didn't seem to hear her soft HELLOS. By noon, Emma had not sold a single painting. She watched as Mrs. Patterson sold her last bunch of flowers and began packing up her stand. Tom was counting the money from his jam sales with a big smile on his face. Emma felt invisible, like a ghost sitting among her colorful creations that nobody wanted. Then an elderly man approached her stand, walking with the slow, careful steps of someone who had learned to notice the important things in life. He wore a simple brown leather jacket that had seen many years of use, and a worn baseball cap was pulled low over his eyes, casting shadows across his withered face. There was something gentle about the way he moved, like he carried kindness in his pockets. The man didn't hurry past like the others. Instead, he stopped directly in front of Emma's table and began studying each painting carefully. He leaned closer to examine the brushstrokes, tilted his head to see how the light hit the colors, and even stepped back to view the compositions from different angles. His attention was complete and respectful, the way someone might study treasures in a museum. Emma watched him with growing curiosity. Most people looked at her paintings quickly, made a decision in seconds, and moved on. This man was different. He seemed to understand that each painting held hours of work, hope, and pieces of Emma's heart, after several minutes of quiet observation. The man pointed to Emma's painting of a lighthouse standing strong against a fierce storm. Dark waves crashed against rocky shores while the lighthouse being cut through the chaos like a sword of light. "This one speaks to me," he said, his voice warm and gentle. "Tell me about it." Emma's voice was soft but steady as she shared the story behind the painting. "When I'm scared about my treatment, I think about lighthouses. They stay strong no matter how bad the storm gets. They keep shining to guide people home. Sometimes I feel like I'm in a storm, but I try to be like the lighthouse and keep my light burning." The man nodded slowly, his eyes showing understanding that went deeper than words. "That's wisdom beyond your years, young lady." Emma felt a warm spread through her chest. The first real comfort she had felt all week. This stranger seemed to truly see her, not as a sick girl trying to sell paintings, but as an artist with something important to say. To Emma's amazement, the man purchased not just the lighthouse painting, but 3 others as well. He chose a sunflower painting that seemed to dance with joy, a peaceful meadow scene that made viewers want to run barefoot through the grass, and a portrait of children playing that captured the pure happiness of childhood before leaving. The man did something that surprised Emma completely. He placed his weathered hand gently on her shoulder, the touch as light as a feather, but as comforting as a warm blanket. "Keep painting, Emma. Keep shining your light. The world needs artists like you." As he walked away, disappearing into the crowd of Saturday shoppers, Emma felt something she hadn't felt in months. It was hope, real and strong and bright. Maybe, just maybe, everything would be all right. Maybe her light was strong enough to guide her through this storm and into calmer waters. 3 days later, Emma was sitting in her bedroom on Tuesday morning, trying to paint despite feeling weak from her latest chemotherapy session. Her mother had left early for work at the hospital, and the house was quiet except for the sound of Emma's brush moving across the canvas. She was working on a new piece, a garden scene filled with bright flowers that seemed to glow with their own inner light. The phone rang downstairs, but Emma ignored it. People often called wrong numbers, and she didn't have the energy to run down the stairs, but the phone kept ringing, again and again, until Emma finally put down her brush and slowly made her way to the kitchen. When she answered, a woman's excited voice nearly burst through the speaker. "Is this Emma Thompson, the artist from Millbrook Market?" Emma was confused. "Yes, this is Emma. Oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm talking to you. I saw the photo online, and I absolutely must have one of your paintings. Do you have any sunflower pieces available?" Before Emma could ask what photo the woman was talking about, the caller continued, "My daughter is fighting cancer too, and your story has given us so much hope. We live in Birmingham, and we'll pay whatever you need plus shipping." Emma's quiet life exploded into something unimaginable over the next few hours. Her phone rang. constantly with calls from strangers who had somehow heard about her and wanted to buy her paintings. Each caller mentioned seeing a photo online, but Emma had no idea what they were talking about. Finally, her neighbor Mrs. Green knocked on the door, holding her tablet, computer, and looking amazed. "Emma, dear, you need to see this. You're famous." Mrs. Green showed Emma a photo that someone had taken at the market on Saturday. It showed Emma sitting behind her table, talking to the elderly man in the brown jacket and baseball cap. The photo had been shared thousands of times on social media, and someone in the comments had recognized the man. Emma's heart nearly stopped when she read the comment. The elderly customer from Saturday, the kind man who had bought her lighthouse painting and spoken such gentle words, wasn't just any customer. He was James Crawford, one of the most famous actors and directors in Hollywood. Emma sat down heavily in her kitchen chair, staring at the screen in disbelief. James Crawford had been in movies that Margaret loved to watch on their old television. He had won awards and walked on red carpets and lived a life that seemed as far from Millbrook as the moon. But the real surprise came the next morning when Emma heard cars pulling up outside their little house on Oak Street. Margaret had stayed home from work because the phone calls were becoming overwhelming. They both peeked through the living room curtains to see what was happening. James Crawford was climbing out of a black car, followed by people carrying cameras and microphones. He looked exactly the same as he had on Saturday, wearing simple clothes and moving with that same gentle confidence behind him. A woman with a notepad was talking quickly into her phone. Margaret opened the front door. Before they could knock, her face pale with shock, James smiled warmly and introduced himself, though by now everyone in Millbrook knew who he was. "I hope you don't mind the surprise visit," he said to Emma, who was hiding behind her mother. "I came back because your story touched my heart, and I thought the world should know about your courage." James hadn't come for fame or publicity. He came because Emma's story and her art had reminded him of something important about the human spirit. He brought a local news crew with him, not to make himself look good, but to shine a light on Emma's talent and bravery, standing beside Emma's art table, which Margaret had quickly set up in their small front garden. James spoke to the reporter with genuine emotion in his voice. "This young woman represents everything beautiful about the human spirit. Her paintings aren't just pictures. They're hope made visible." The reporter asked James why he had decided to help Emma, and his answer made Margaret cry happy tears. When you meet someone who faces darkness with such grace and creates light for others, you don't walk away. You do everything you can to help that light shine brighter. James announced he was purchasing 10 more of Emma's paintings for his own collection. But more than that, he had already contacted several friends in the entertainment industry who wanted to buy Emma's work after he showed them photos of her paintings. Within hours of the news story airing on local television and being shared online, Emma's phone began ringing constantly with orders from across the country. The little house on Oak Street became the center of a miracle that nobody could have imagined. People from London called wanting landscape paintings for their offices. Families from Manchester ordered portraits to hang in their children's bedrooms. Art collectors from Scotland asked about purchasing entire series of Emma's work. Each call brought not just money for Emma's treatment, but messages of support and love from strangers who saw her as a symbol of hope. The shy girl from Millbrook had become a symbol of courage for thousands of people facing their own storms. Margaret cried happy tears as the orders piled up, knowing her daughter's treatment would be fully covered and that Emma's future was suddenly bright with possibilities she had never dared to dream. 6 months later, Emma stood in the children's ward of Millbrook Hospital on a bright spring morning that felt like the first day of the rest of her life. The hospital corridors that had once filled her with fear and anxiety now felt like a second home. She wore a simple blue dress that Margaret had bought for this special day, and her hair had grown back in soft brown curls that caught the sunlight streaming through the windows. The bell that marked the end of successful cancer treatment hung on the wall near the nurse's station. It was a large brass bell that had been rung by hundreds of patients over the years, each ring representing a victory over illness and a return to health. Emma's hands shook slightly as she reached for the rope, not from weakness this time, but from overwhelming joy and gratitude. When Emma pulled the rope, the sound echoed through the corridors like a celebration of life itself. Nurses stopped their work to applaud. Doctors smiled and nodded their approval. Other patients and their families gathered in the hallway, clapping and cheering for the brave young woman who had fought so hard and won. Margaret stood nearby with tears of happiness streaming down her face. She remembered all the frightening nights when she had wondered if her daughter would survive, all the days when Emma had been too sick to get out of bed, and all the times when hope had seemed as fragile as a soap bubble. Now her daughter was healthy and strong and ready to embrace the future. Emma's art sales had accomplished something that seemed impossible just months before. Not only had they paid for all her medical expenses, but they had also created enough money for Emma to attend art school. The bank account that had once been empty now held enough funds to cover for years of education at the finest art college in the country. But money and education weren't the most important things Emma had gained from her experience. More importantly, Emma had discovered her true calling in life. The months of treatment had taught her that art wasn't just about creating beautiful pictures to hang on walls. Art was about healing, about expressing feelings that were too deep for words, and about connecting with other people who needed hope. Emma had approached Dr. Harrison, the same doctor who had given her the frightening diagnosis months earlier, with an idea that excited her more than anything she had ever imagined. She wanted to start an art therapy program at the hospital, teaching young patients to express their hopes and fears through painting. Dr. Harrison had been amazed by Emma's transformation from scared patient to confident young woman. With a mission to help others, the hospital administration quickly approved her program, providing a sunny room near the children's ward and all the art supplies that Emma requested. On the opening day of the program, Emma stood before her first class of young patients. There was 7-year-old Tom, who had lost his hair to chemotherapy but still had the brightest smile Emma had ever seen. 8-year-old Sarah sat in a wheelchair, her leg in a cast, but her eyes sparkled with curiosity about the paints and brushes ranged on the tables. 10-year-old Michael had been in the hospital for weeks and hadn't spoken much to anyone, but he picked up a paintbrush with eager fingers. "Art helped me heal from the inside out," Emma told her first class, her voice strong and clear. "When I was scared, I painted lighthouses to remind me to stay strong. When I felt sad, I painted sunflowers to remember that happiness would come back. Now we're going to paint our way to hope together." The children listened with the kind of attention that comes from understanding that someone truly knows what they are going through. Emma wasn't just a teacher to them. She was proof that the storm they were facing would eventually pass, and that something beautiful could grow from even the darkest experiences. James Crawford, who had quietly become a friend and mentor to Emma over the past months, attended the program's opening ceremony. He sat in the back of the room, watching with amazement as Emma helped Tom paint his first rainbow after losing his hair to chemotherapy. The little boy's face glowed with pride as he added purple and blue stripes to his colorful creation. James had sent Emma encouraging letters throughout her treatment, and had even visited Millbrook Twick to check on her progress. He had told Emma that meeting her had reminded him why he had fallen in love with storytelling in the first place. Real stories about real courage were more powerful than any movie he had ever made. Emma's lighthouse painting now hung in the hospital's main entrance, where everyone who entered could see it. A small brass plaque beneath it read, "In every storm, there is light. In every ending, there is a new beginning." Patients and families would stop to look at the painting, finding comfort in its message of hope and strength. As Emma looked round, the art room filled with laughing children creating colorful masterpieces. She realized that sometimes the greatest challenges in life become the foundation for the most beautiful contributions to the world. Her fight with cancer had ended, but her fight to bring hope to others was just beginning, and she had never felt more ready for anything in her life. The end.